Well, here we go. I have been studiously avoiding all Goodreads Choice Awards spoilers all day, and yet have still managed to see that they've pissed off readers in novel ways, and you almost have to respect it. So what I have seen from the hullabaloo going in that I have tried to not see too much of is that they have cut some categories and also added Romantasy as a category. I don't know if that is the only addition. I mean, we'll find out here shortly. I will say, even though they've broken out Romantasy as its own section this year, I bet we still don't see any historical romance in the romances. But while I was primed to be frustrated, I'll give them this. This was not how I expected to be frustrated so early, especially as I am assuming the write-in option has still not returned. So I guess with that being said, it is time to jump on in. I do have a cider with me because I have a feeling I'm going to need it. So let's go ahead and start with fiction. I have my computer down here, so I will be looking down. Okay, the Alice Hoffman, which I completely forgot came out this year. Mamie Sharkheart, which I've seen everywhere but haven't read. Ellen Hilderbrand, that makes sense. Big Swiss, I still need to read. I've been seeing a lot about that. Yellow Face, which is being put in fiction instead of thriller. Pineapple Street, The Celibants, Blackouts, which has been nominated for some very big awards and I have not got to yet. I did request a copy at my local bookstore and then forgot about it, so I need to go get that. Birnam Wood, which we've talked about in addition to Yellowface in a Feature Friday. Okay, Family Meal is a standout. Wellness, I'm not surprised to see because the Nathan Hill has been getting a lot of promo, and I'm assuming those promo dollars as well. The Wishing Game has been kind of a standout this year. I've seen that around a lot. Okay, so there are some books here that I'm like, yeah, absolutely. There are also some books where I'm like, nah, I don't really have any feelings about them one way or the other, which is not surprising. For me, I think this is going to come down between Yellowface and Birnam Wood, and Yellowface definitely, I think, is going to be my pick here, but I kind of want to get the full lay of the land before I commit to anything, so let's move on to historical fiction. Okay, we have the Lisa C. Wayward is here, The Vaster Wilds is here, which I still need to read, and luckily this voting round is a little bit longer, so I can still slip some of these in. I'm not going to just name off every title that has been nominated, I promise. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, which also won the Barnes & Noble Novel of the Year, and I had no qualms with that because it seems to be tackling something really important and kind of placing us in a specific moment, which I appreciate. So I'm very interested in that one still. The Jessamine Ward Northwoods, which I am still very intrigued by in terms of its structure because it feels like it's going to be a little bit more experimental. Okay. All right, I have not read any of these yet, and I used to consider myself a historical fiction reader. I should probably prioritize Wayward and The Vaster Wilds if I'm going to get to anything before voting ends. I have The Vaster Wilds in my more immediate TBR pile, so that is where I am leaning, but I probably won't vote until I've at least read it. Moving on to mystery and thriller, I'm not going to even pretend like I've read any of these books. I also apologize for my voice. I'm still getting over that cold, so it's a little rough right now. All right, as expected. Nope, that's a lie. I read The Villa, and I've read I Have Some Questions for You, though neither of them are showing up that I've read. I guess I just have to know this year if I've read the book. In the past, they've showed us if we've read the book, haven't they? That's odd. Okay, so Bright Young Women doesn't surprise me there. In between The Villa and I Have Some Questions for You, I am definitely going to lean I Have Some Questions for You. I am shocked that I've read any books in this category. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm actually now thinking to look at the categories on the side to see what is gone. Oh, they've really cut back. Oh, they've really cut back. Okay, so just at my first kind of perusal, we don't have a lot of the specific nonfiction categories. We don't have middle grade. We don't have poetry, but I need to circle back to we don't have middle grade. I understand that middle grade is not the main kind of focus for a lot of readers on Goodreads because middle grade readers aren't supposed to be on Goodreads yet, and so they presumably get a lot less ratings and reviews than adult, young adult, all of those titles. However, what an absolute slap in the face to middle grade that is putting out some of the best work. Like the idea that we've taken out a category in which something like Amari and the Knight Brothers lives, this is actually really upsetting. I don't understand why they would do this. I'm sure there's some justification somewhere, and I will see if I can find it later, but that's really offensive. Wait, they also got rid of graphic novels. So not only did they get rid of middle grade after already consolidating middle grade and children's into one category, which I already disagreed with there, but they've also gotten rid of graphic novels, which has really pushed a lot of boundaries in terms of form. I also would like to say the idea of getting rid of middle grade in a landscape in which we are seeing so much book banning, and these books need as much attention as they can get, it makes it very obvious where the priorities for these awards lies, and to a certain extent, I get it. It is a popular award and we have to take it at face value for that, but to totally discredit bodies of work in this way just because they maybe aren't as popular on your platform, and to kind of like move with the tides in the way they are. Like Romantasy was kind of a breakout this year in terms of romance subgenre, but it's always been around. So I don't know. There are so many authors that were probably looking forward to seeing a possible nomination here that just isn't there. And with that, let's look at they nominated romantic comedy in Best Romance. To be fair, I have not read it yet, but having gone to that talk, I have real concerns about whether we would label this a romance. Also, having been at that talk, it very much felt like the idea of romance filtered through a literary fiction author, and that's fine. I totally understand that point of view, but it didn't seem to have much respect for the genre of romance and the craft of romance. And so to see it taking a spot within that genre is kind of a bummer. Hucking Around has been very big. A lot of these have been very big. The Allie Hazelwood, The 7-Year Slip, which I haven't read yet. I've enjoyed Ashley Poston's young adult romance. I didn't love The Dead Romantics, but I know that I have an unpopular opinion there, so I'm willing to give it a go. Okay, Rebecca Yarros, which we know we will see again. There's no historical romance. So they created a whole other romance category, and we still don't have any historical romance in here. I understand that a lot of this is probably pulled from just the most shelved, the most read, the most rated. It really is a People's Choice Award in a lot of ways, but to see the way that this subgenre has been kind of pushed out, it's kind of baffling, especially in this kind of after Bridgerton world where it really should be having a kind of renaissance. And we also have so many great romances. And from my kind of first perusal, it's appearing pretty white. And last year we had books like Dating Dr. Dill, at least in the first round, whose sequel came out this year. We had An Island Princess Starts a Scandal, which is historical romance, but also should have been nominated. It also feels like an incredibly straight list, so it feels like we've kind of moved backwards in some ways on a lot of the really fantastic gains we've made in the genre. If you can hear my radiators humming, that just kind of fits the moment, doesn't it? So I was prepared to be kind of underwhelmed and disappointed by this category. I admit that, but kind of like facing it head on, I'm underwhelmed and disappointed. Just kind of putting together this picture where I already felt like as a long-standing romance reader that who I am as a romance reader isn't really fitting in where the genre seems to be going right now or with what is popular. And I don't need to be popular. I get that, but it's just kind of a bummer. It's kind of a bummer. And I'm not taking away anything from any of these authors that I have not read. I want to be clear, but I don't know. If you have thoughts as well, let me know below, but that's just kind of what I'm feeling right now. And I recognize, kind of looking through again, it's not a completely white list with authors like Anna Huang, and I don't want to discredit her or her popularity, though I have not read her yet, but I know she is incredibly popular in the genre right now. So with that being said, let's move on to Romantasy, which is maybe the reason we don't have graphic novels and middle grade anymore. If there is not a middle grade category for me to vote for the next Amari book, I swear, okay. I don't know if I'll have read like most of these. I have the Hurricane Wars on a list somewhere. Okay, I mean, I've read Fourth Wing. Let's be real. I've read The Foxglove King, but there's no romance. That we don't get to the romance in The Foxglove King. Like, we can see it being set up, and I am interested in where it's going, but the romance isn't there. So is it, okay, I guess we just have to go on the series rules of Romantasy. I guess Romantasy is like not a happily ever after in itself, and there may be different conventions that we are accepting within Romantasy versus romance. I get that, okay. Also, I think the person my voice is annoying the most is myself. So I don't know, which I realize I say a lot, but you tell me, should I prioritize any of the rest of this list, because I don't dislike Romantasy, I want to be clear, but all of these covers kind of bleed together, which again, conventions of different subgenres, helping to indicate to readers what they may be interested in, not knocking that, but I don't know if there's anything on this list that I should prioritize, but you can let me know. And also how you're feeling about this category in general. I will say there's smushing of Romantasy right in between romance and fantasy is smart. I also have noted, or at least I think, this could just be recency bias, that they have moved romance up in the category listings. Like, I remember horror being higher last year in terms of going through the categories. So to me, that indicates that we are kind of finally acknowledging the power of romance, because we have seen this resurgence and this real spike in popularity in the mainstream in romance for the last couple of years. So moving on to fantasy proper, we are not surprised by the Brandon Sanderson. I am a little surprised by the Adrienne Young, because I didn't love her release last year, and this felt like it was in a similar vein. So if you've read this one, let me know what you think of that book, if it was better than last year's, or if it's similar. Venko, I have read. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I could see taking this category if Brandon Sanderson wasn't up there, but that was incredibly popular. I know that I am kind of on the unpopular opinion side of the spectrum in that I liked it, but it wasn't like my favorite thing ever, because there seems to be a lot of passion behind that book. But I have a Future Friday around that as well. The new Leigh Bardugo, the new V.E. Schwab in the Darker Shade of Magic series, which I haven't read yet, and was deceptive in its packaging because it's like, what, 600 pages? We'll see about that. I didn't even know there was a new Rushdie this year, and I go through anticipated releases every month, so that's maybe not saying the best about myself. Starling House I just finished. We will talk about that more on Friday, don't you worry. Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, I still need to read. Bookshops and Bone Dust is kind of a surprise because of how recently it's come out. So based on this list, I am leaning towards Starling House, though I recognize that that is a lighter fantasy than a lot on this list. There is the new Cassandra Clare as well, but I haven't really been following that at all. Also the new Samantha Shannon. I'm not trying to skip these. There's just a lot more in this category that I at least have some passing familiarity with, which is saying something because I haven't been reading as much like high fantasy this year. That being said, I feel like this category in the Choice Awards isn't always as high fantasy. It's a little bit more, I hate to use the word accessible because high fantasy is still accessible, not all of it, to be fair. But I think we all know, if you are here with me in this video, that this is a little bit more appealing to the masses. And with that, let's move on to science fiction and see what we've got. I know last year I was shocked by just how much of the science fiction category I had read. This year, I don't think I'm going to have that. I mean, granted, I obviously didn't last year either, but I have not read nearly enough science fiction this year. I have a whole lot of science fiction sitting on my TBR, but I'm really just behind on a lot of titles this year. And odds are that you're not seeing titles in the order that I'm looking at them because I still have not perfected the system. Okay, we've got the Naomi Alderman. Oh, Chain Gang All-Stars is here, which is a perfect example of how in the moment I am with this. I'm like, yeah, what other books existed this year? I don't even know, because I would have been expecting to see this in literature, although now that I really think about it, this is where it would be, because the Literary Fiction Award is much more kind of book clubby to my kind of assessment. You let me know if you agree or disagree. I mean, that's not really the tenor of any of my book clubs, but you know what I mean, right? Right? All right, so Lives of Puppets, which I didn't realize was sci-fi. Land of Milk and Honey, again, still on my TBR. Bridge, still on my TBR. I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, still on my TBR. So I should probably prioritize those. Has anyone read Land of Milk and Honey and know whether it would be doable on audio without losing anything? Just because I still have her other book on my TBR, and that looks like it plays with form a little bit in the way that I would kind of want to see it laid out on the page. So I'm not sure. So I am going to vote for Chain Gang All-Stars, but I'm also going to use the opportunity to try and prioritize some of these other books I have physically in my possession on my TBR that I want to read. So that's that about that. I will say, still shockingly more than I expected, to note on this list. I feel like this video is going to be all over the place, and I apologize. I wanted to come in with real and profound thoughts, and you're getting me just kind of like bouncing everywhere. And with that, let's bounce over to horror, which I was again last year shocked by how many I knew. And this year I have an expectation that I will at least know them a little bit more. Whether I read them or not is a different story. And yes, okay, Sisters of the Lost Nation, which I have started and need to finish. The Reformatory, which I am eagerly awaiting my library hold on. So if the library wants to hurry up with that one, that would be great. Vampires del Norte, Lone Women. Lone Women's in the lead for me right now based on what I'm looking at. Oh, that's a lie. Oh, this is a good category. Oh my. Okay, so this is the most stacked category, and I anticipate this for me probably being the most stacked category. Okay, so we've got Lone Women, we've got Rouge, which is still on my immediate TBR, we've got Our Share of Night, which, let's be real here, it's the Mariana Enriquez, so, you know, put a pin in that. Natural Beauty, which the more I sit with it, the more I'm like, yeah, that was really smart. It wasn't perfect in its execution to me, but I am absolutely thrilled to see this on the list because I definitely think it deserves that recognition. A House with Good Bones, Silver Nitrate, which admittedly isn't my favorite Silvia Moreno Garcia, but still glad to see it here. Monstrilio, which I still need to read. Looking forward to that one too. I am a little shocked to not see The Haunting of Alejandra and Piñata, which I also still need to read. I know I've been in the middle of The Haunting of Alejandra for like, what, 2 months now at this point, but it's my phone book, so it doesn't get pulled out under the covers. Are we shocked? My vote is automatically going to Our Share of Night here. It is probably going to end up being my favorite book of the year, knock on wood. I mean, not knock on wood. I would surely love to read something that I loved as much as this book or more yet this year, but this is a rough category because I would love to vote for so many of these books in the way that in other categories I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll vote for that book. You know what I mean? So between Our Share of Night, my second would be Lone Women for sure. I don't know, Our Share of Night is definitely more traditional horror as I would think of it, even though it's literary horror. None of these, it's interesting, not none of these, because there is the Stephen King, which is gonna be a real contender. But when I'm thinking about like horror as I like to read it, or what I read that gets classified as horror, I should say, it's not what I would think about as like traditional horror, which again kind of puts us in that category of what makes it to the Choice Awards are the kind of more accessible titles, the titles that kind of bleed genre conventions or bleed into different genres. But that being said, I wonder if it is also a reflection on where the genre kind of is right now. I don't know. More established, seasoned, tenured horror readers, let me know what you think of this category and how it reflects on the genre as a whole and the state of the genre as a whole. But as a selfish reader myself, I am pretty pleased with this category. Moving right along, losing more voice with every category that we go through, young adult fantasy and science fiction. Here we have, as expected, Divine Rivals, which that is my front runner, first book out of the gate, for me anyway. I don't know what you're looking at right now, sorry. The Stolen Heir, not really surprised, but really haven't heard anything about that book since it came out, since I read it. I haven't really seen a lot of sustained buzz. Okay, here we've got some more justifying my TBR, which doesn't work in the sense that the more books that appear that are still sitting in my TBR, I'm not gonna get to all of them still, but Delicious Monsters and Blood Debts. Most of these books I also mentioned in my TBR video. We've got The Scarlet Veil, the new Shelby Mahurin, which, not surprised, I am interested. Anyone that's read that book yet, let me know. I was tempted by it, but then I remembered how disappointed I was by the last book in the Serpent and Dove series, and I was like, I'm gonna wait. Okay, Study of Drowning is here too, which again, I've read. Song of Silver, Flame Like Night, what another great example of a book I've had sitting on my TBR since January, but there we go. Okay, I see the other books here, but I'm really focused on what I'm focused on, and what I'm focused on comes down to between A Study in Drowning and Divine Rivals. I'm going to vote for Divine Rivals. I'm going to be honest with you, but I want to still get to Delicious Monsters and Blood Debts, and I'm excited to see them here. Also, Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. Threads That Bind, I had checked out of the library and didn't get it read before it was due back, so let me know if that is worth getting back on a hold list for or not, but Divine Rivals, let's be real. And if it went to anything else in this category, I would be shocked and probably a little impressed. but I anticipate it going to Divine Rivals because that has been a real standout book of the year. But moving on to Best Young Adult Fiction, we've got The Davenports. So excited to see that here. We've got Immortality, a love story, sequel to Anatomy, a love story, which I know people are very interested in based on that video still getting watched or my review of that still getting watched. I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence about the first book. Let me know if you've read this book, the sequel, if it's worth it. We've got Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute, Talia Hibbert's debut YA rom-com. Got other books, Together We Rot, which I think I just had an audiobook hold come in on. Don't know when I'll get to that. We've got Warrior Girl Unearthed, which I also still want to read. Don't actively have in my possession, but it's on the more kind of amorphous TBR for sure. Based on this, I think my vote will probably actually go to The Davenports. I know it wasn't a perfect book for me. It felt a little rushed in some places. I wanted to get to spend more time with the characters, but I understood why it had to be rushed in certain places in terms of making sure all the through lines and the threads wove together in the way that they needed to. And I also just absolutely loved the setting. It feels like the most kind of Bridgerton payoff we're seeing in the modern moment in its historical romance focus. And I also love the setting of Chicago here. So I'm very excited to see where this series continues to go. I'm glad to have another kind of historical kind of romance series in the young adult space because I loved them when I was a young adult. So yeah, I think I might go with that one just because it's also a newer voice and I would like to reward that with my vote. But I will be very interested to see how this category goes. I think that Allie Hazelwood will perform very, very well. I'm not sure really what else will make it. I mean, the Karen McManus probably, and maybe the Holly Jackson, because I know thrillers in the young adult space have been historically very popular the last few years. I don't know this year if we're seeing that same level of popularity. To be clear, I'm not making a statement there. I legitimately don't know. So if you work with young readers or you're a bookseller, you let me know what you think about that one. All right, moving on to debut novel, the category where I go, oh right, that was a debut. Let's see, okay, Chain Gang All-Stars we're counting as a debut. Well, it is a debut novel. So, yep, that counts. Wayward, which I've heard mixed things about now, kind of past my TBR video. People had very mixed responses to that. So, Chain Gang All-Stars is my front runner here yet again. The Bandit Queens, I started and couldn't get into. I might need to try and revisit that. Monstrilio, okay, that's great to see here. Adelaide, which got a lot of buzz at the beginning of the year, and I didn't really see much about it later in the year, and we didn't see it in fiction. So it's here, so that's great. Okay, I keep my exoskeletons to myself again. Otherwise, a lot of these I am feeling really out of the loop on. Pineapple Street, I know has been getting a lot of buzz. Shark Heart I've seen around, but I feel like I don't know this category as well as maybe I have historically. So I don't know. We are again in a different configuration here, going to vote for Chain Gang All-Stars and keep Monstrilio on our you need to read that book list. Moving on to nonfiction. So this year we have general nonfiction, memoir and autobiography, and history and biography, and humor. Memoir and autobiography, we're not there yet, but that is the category I have been anticipating the kind of standoff in all year. So we'll see what made it through. I mean, we know at least 2 or 3 titles that made it through, but let's see. So nonfiction first. I don't know any of the top books. I know Poverty by America. I know How Far the Light Reaches, which I do have on audio. It must have come out after the awards last year because I think it did come out in 2022. So it must have come out after the qualification period. Opinions by Roxane Gay. How have I not read this book yet? I love Roxane Gay. I've been itching for a new essay collection from Roxane Gay for years. I need to get my stuff together. Okay. So Opinions, How Far the Light Reaches, Poverty. Doppelganger I know of and had kind of pulled back from. I wasn't sure about it based on kind of like some of the early stuff I was reading, but now it's picking up some buzz after release. And so now I'm interested again. That sounds very wishy-washy, but you know, it is what it is. So if you've read this one, let me know what you think of that one. I would be interested in maybe picking that up on audio. Honor Best Behavior I have listened to on audio, very interested to see it here. I really enjoyed the kind of framework of that book. It is a more history-focused book, which isn't there a whole history category? Yeah, but I guess maybe because it's social science, because it's kind of looking at the 7 deadly sins through a feminist lens. So it's not like history focused. History is just a lens we sometimes use to kind of look at things. Okay, we will buy it. And then Butts, a backstory, which I have seen, had no clue, honestly, that this came out this year. It looks like a cover that has just always been around since like 2016, but apparently, it just came out this year. So there you go. I am a little surprised not to see Saving Time on here. So, okay, I need to read the Roxane Gay. I've read Poverty by America. I've read On Our Best Behavior, which I'm tempted to vote for just to get it through to the next round potentially, because I definitely think it deserves to be there. And Roxane Gay will probably make it through on her own merit there, but I still need to read that. So, okay, we've got a kind of plan of action on nonfiction. A lot of this hasn't even really been on my radar, and I thought I had a lot more nonfiction on my radar this year, so just goes to show me I don't know anything. So, memoir and autobiography it is. The moment of truth. Months of lead up to this moment. Okay, so right off the bat, we've got a couple of Duggar memoirs here that I somehow forgot to factor into the mix. It will be very interesting if one makes it through and the other doesn't. We've got the new Nicole Chung, which has been getting a lot of buzz on the literary side of memoir, so that is a great entry there. We've got Page Boy by Elliot Page. That is expected. And then of course we've got the Britney Spears memoir and Spare. So this is just gonna come down between The Woman in Me and Spare. I know that right now. At the beginning of the year, obviously, I thought Spare was gonna kind of move through the year uncontested. The Britney Spears memoir got announced early-ish in the year, and it outsold the Prince Harry book when it dropped a couple of weeks ago. So we've got a real potential upset here when it seemed like the category was like on lock in January. So interested to see how this plays out, interested to see what makes it through to the next round here. But if you think that there are any of these other memoirs that I should have on my radar, let me know. And with that, let's move over to history and biography, where I bet we're gonna find the Barnes & Noble Author of the Year with The Wager, that I don't necessarily think is for The Wager. Wait, is it here? Yeah, it's here. Don't worry, it's here. So, okay, The Wager, ew, Bill O'Reilly, gross. But then we also have Pathogenesis, which I listened to, and I really appreciated because it took a unique approach in that it kind of charted our social history through 8 plagues, and I thought that was a really unique approach, and it kind of recontextualized a lot about different societies at different times. I actually think that that is written through a more interesting lens than the David Grann was, because I listened to that one too, and I kind of got lost in it. Thought its pacing was a little off. I talk a lot more about it, I think, in my July wrap up, but it was fine. It wasn't the best boat book I've ever read though, and the fact that so much of the book was relying on this mutiny, I mean, it was framed by the idea of this mutiny. The book was about a mutiny, and it felt like we got so little of the politics of the mutiny and the mutiny itself. I don't know, maybe I'm just being bitter, but this book didn't really blow me out of the water. That's the second time in 2 days that I've inadvertently made a boat book or a water pun related to this book, so I need to stop. I don't know how I'm feeling about this category. I have not read a lot of these, but let me know if there's any on this list that you think that I should check out, because I'm sure there are still some really excellent titles here. I am just becoming aware of how little I know. I am glad that the Marquis de Sade book didn't make it, because I did not like that book. Okay, humor. Sure, I'll Join Your Cult, which I am waiting on my library hold. Story of My Life. Quietly Hostile, which I really enjoyed. Okay, so I'm aware of at least some more of these than I thought. Was it the 90s in humor last year? Am I making that up? I know I can fact check that, but I don't know. I'm not going to. So, okay, those are the books I know in this category. We've got some more celebrity memoirs that are kind of filtering through to this category, as we usually see if the celebrity is considered a comic or a comedic actor. Considered a comic is a comic or a comedic actor, but that is where we are kind of sitting. I am intrigued by this David Mitchell History of the Kings and Queens of England that is listed in the humor category. That could be fun. Should I read that? Was that good? You tell me. So I don't know, what are we thinking? I feel like I'm not even like entertainingly up in arms, because at this point I'm just kind of like resigned. Like, yeah, of course this is what it is. Looking back through my books, I don't know that there are too many that I'm like, oh yeah, that was missed. Now, granted, there are plenty on my TBR that I'm like, oh, I think that's gonna be great. That may have been a miss. I will say I am surprised that of any historical romance to not make it on the list in terms of like broad popularity, the Queen Charlotte book didn't make it to the romance list. Now, to be fair, I don't think it should have, but I think that if any historical romance was primed to make it onto the romance list, it would have been that book. At this point, I'm like, should I just do it myself? Like, should I put together a list of books in these categories that I think should be nominated? But at the same time, have I read enough in any of these categories to nominate things. I was interested that Burnham Wood did make it through to nominations because I expected that book to be a lot buzzier than I think it has been, in that this is all anecdotal, right? I haven't seen it as buzzy as I anticipated, especially following the Luminaries, and my feature Friday on it didn't do as well as I expected because I expected people to be more interested in this book, which is neither here nor there. I was interested in the book, so I read it, and then I talked about it. I am glad. I don't think I saw the London Seance Society on this list. I'm a little shocked that She Is a Haunting wasn't in the young adult section because that has been really popular this year, and I think it was doing really interesting things, so that was a little bit of a surprise for me. Other than that, I would have loved if We Are Also Good at Smiling by Amber McBride made it into the young adult category, but I guess it was a little bit more experimental. It maybe wasn't as broadly appealing, obviously, to make it into that category. So yeah, She Says Again. I think that's where we're kind of sitting. What are you thinking about these books? What are you thinking about these categories? What are we thinking about the elimination of graphic novels and middle grade? I can't get over that. Like, why can't we just add a category? Like, gosh forbid we give out too many Goodreads Choice Awards. Like, come on, really? Mentally, I still think of the Choice Awards as a new thing. To be fair, until a couple of years ago, I thought of the reading challenges as a new thing. And that started so long ago, but I've been on the platform since 2007. But yeah, we again have a year where we don't have the write-in option. I don't see that coming back at this point, and that's a real shame because like I've said before, I have seen that move the needle. And again, in some of these categories where we know what the outcome is going to be, we know what the outcome of the Romantasy category is going to be. Like, don't even lie to yourself that I think it's going to be anything else. And I don't think I have to tell you not to lie to yourself because nobody's lying to themselves. But I think it is still valuable to be able to nominate things and get other books that people are excited about into these categories in terms of discoverability. Now, I know this opens the floodgates for people to kind of like attack and spam and to have like a small contingent of fans kind of manipulate the process in whatever way. But for some books, I can see that moving the needle quite a lot. And I've seen historically categories really shift between nomination rounds. Actually, can I go back and look at these historically? Let me see. Okay, so it doesn't look at first perusal. Like, I can go and see what changed between rounds. I probably could if I dug a little deeper, but I'm not seeing the functionality in this quick kind of peek. I will say in 2017, there were 3 historical romances nominated, which, I mean, isn't like a whole lot, but it's something. We had the Lisa Kleypas, which was my vote, according to Goodreads. We had the Beverly Jenkins, and we had the Tessa Dare. Remember when we were still getting new Tessa Dare books? That was great. Also, this feels like the first time in a long time that we haven't gotten a Lisa Kleypas book during the year, but we did get a Sarah MacLean book during the year, and a very anticipated one, and yet it is still not on the nominations for romance. So I would say I'm not bitter about it, but that would be a bold-faced lie, wouldn't it? Okay, now I'm just looking through historical romance nominations, and this is not helping. It looks like in 2013 there was also not historical romance, but there was a Nicholas Sparks book, so I need to step away. That's not helping anything. I don't know what my broad thoughts really are because this reading year has felt a little weird to me. I'm not gonna lie. I've talked about books that feel like they're kind of being read through a film before, and I almost feel like that's what this reading year has been for me, which is odd because at the beginning of the year when I was laid off, I, in theory, had more dedicated reading time. I should have really been present with my reading, but I was also in panic brain, so that does impact things. Also, with the splitting up of these books into categories, it really doesn't kind of show us like the real standouts for the year in terms of like amidst its peers. It's looking at its genre peers, but especially in something like fiction, where I consider myself a literary fiction reader, but that category illustrates that I clearly read a lot more speculative literary fiction than like more mainstream literary fiction. And then you've got categories like horror and sci-fi that have some of, in my opinion, which all of this ever is, are the best books of the year, especially in horror. You've got like a lot of really great books. In fantasy, there was a lot of really great books. Not a lot of high fantasy, again, as I mentioned before. Fantasy readers also let me know, similar to horror readers, what you think of that category and the nominations, and whether you feel it's like really reflective of your genre, or whether it has that kind of mass appeal filter, which I think we all know it does to some degree because all of them do. But I don't know that I have any real like gem of a thought here. So I am just grateful that you are here at all. As always, like, subscribe, comment. All interaction helps and I do appreciate it. And I just also like really want to hear what you are thinking about this, because I think this is kind of one of the times of year where we're able to get together as a reading community and be like, what's going on over here though? And sometimes it's exciting. And sometimes it's like, well, that was that. So I would be interested to know where you're falling on that spectrum, as everything always is. But thanks for hanging out and listening to my first kind of initial reaction in babble form here. Let me know, based on this voting and like what has been nominated, what you think I should prioritize that's still sitting on my TBR. And we have video evidence that much of this is sitting on my TBR. So that's great. You know I'm not a liar, but thanks for hanging out. Like I said, like and subscribe if you feel like it. Read something good. We've got some more options here. We've got some catching up to do in some ways, or at least I do. I guess I can't speak for you. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've been more on it this year than I have. But there are still so many good books that have come out this year that have not been nominated. There is the travesty of the missing categories. So maybe go read a middle grade or a graphic novel. Maybe that's what we all need to do. But again, thank you. And yeah, bye.